Your budget revision, which is also considered your budget modification, has several requirements. Your request on letterhead with an explanation and a signature from your authorized representative, your 424A, a line item budget that has been revised, a narrative with your revised amounts, other information that you may feel is necessary, and your current indirect cost rate agreement if the budget has been changed to increase or decrease your indirect cost. So in general, grantees are allowed a degree of latitude to re-budget within and between budget categories to meet unanticipated needs and to make other types of post-award changes. These budget modifications are allowed provided they are activities detailed in the approved OWP for that budget period, and then they don't meet one or more of the approved requirements in the 45 CFR 7425 or 92.3. Please ensure that your ANA program specialist has a copy of your current working budget. For other items, for other guidance and information, please contact your OGM grant specialist and your ANA program specialist. And Charles is going to give you a few items that do and don't need your ANA approval just to get you started here.
Hello everyone,
Charles?
And thank you, Angela. These are going to be some very broad overviews of some examples of when you can and when you need and don't need ANA's approval to transfer funds. An example of when you don't need ANA's approval because it fits within your 10% is you budget for a shipping cost and the shipper turns around and reduces the cost of shipping as an in-kind and you are left over with some little extra funds. You're not going to just keep those funds in that account or that line item. You're going to transfer them to another line item, and as long as it's within your 10% of your budget, you're allowable to do that. Another example would be you're purchasing a computer and you put in for an estimated $700 as you get into purchasing. As many of us know that the prices often do go up and you end up with an $800 computer. As long as it's within your 10% total budget, it's an allowable change. Now this last one is kind of a tricky one. A late start in hiring project staff leads to a surplus in money. Your project, we're supposed to account for 10 months in the first year unless you already have a staff member identified. You're 3 months into your project and you still haven't accounted for a staff member. You're going to have to adjust for that, and you may fall within the approved amount so that you don't have to do the staff change that Angela had mentioned, where they're gone for a certain amount of time. So just keep in mind that many situations occur where you do have the extra funds in a line item that can be transferred between each other as long as they do not exceed the 10% of your total budget. Please note that a late start in hiring of staff that results in the absence of more than 3 months, that will require an ANA approval and is considered a change in personnel. So that's why I said that last bullet point is a little bit of a tricky one. The 3 months or the 25% of the time is very key to that one item. And it may not be required to make budget changes, but it is always recommended that you communicate with your program specialist about any potential changes. Oh, I went too far. These are some examples that do need ANA's approval. Things that result in a change in the scope of your project. A change in the scope of your project for ANA purposes is a change in scope that may result in a significant alteration of the approved project activities, change in the direction of the project, or the type of services delivered, the number of beneficiaries to be served, or the trainings to be provided. An example of this is a grantee had listed a specific piece of equipment that was manufactured for the purpose of the grant by one company, which went out of business. It was no longer able to produce that piece of equipment, and so the item couldn't be manufactured by another company, and the grantee had contacted ANA to do a change in scope. It used a different type of equipment, which was modified. It used a different type of equipment. They modified their work plan and worked with their program specialist to get the changes approved. Please note that this is an example of how ANA is willing to work with grantees when things come up that is beyond the control of the grantees. And they work with them to allow them to finish the proposed project, but this is an exception, not the rule. Changes of scope for a project is very rare. Adding a new line item that falls under the prior approval cost principles according to the OMB Circulars 87 for tribes and 122 for nonprofits. An example of this is you want to purchase a piece of equipment that was not previously approved, and please remember that equipment is defined as a single item purchase with a purchase value of $5,000 or greater. The change results in need for additional federal funding. An example would be as a result of some unexpected water sample results which could prove harmful to the community. You want to run further tests and send them out to a third-party lab for testing, but your project did not account for these testings or the funds to cover it. You work with your program specialist and it can be considered for approval. You move funds from direct cost to indirect cost and vice versa. An example of this would be your indirect cost rate has changed and now you want to move funds from direct costs to cover that new rate. It's something that you have to go over with your program specialist. Transfer of funds from allotted for training. So you're transferring the funds for training allowances to other budget categories. An example of this would be a grant-funded training for young parents, which provides travel stipends, was canceled and you were unable to reschedule your training, and now you want to use those funds, those leftover funds, to purchase some additional supplies. These would all be examples of things that you need to contact your project specialist and go through the modifications to get a budget mod completed.
Thank you, Charles. So as we're moving through this, again, when you sign into Grant Solutions, you will note each of the forms that need to be uploaded or filled out online. So your 424A is filled out online. Your cover letter will be uploaded. Your budget narrative will be uploaded, and other miscellaneous information. So I also want to note that several of the examples we are using here have been simplified for the sake of the webinar. Your budgets will look much larger and probably a little more complicated than what we're showing here. So when you're moving money between categories, be sure to show both the positive and the negative amounts. For example, if you're moving money from travel to equipment, You would show a negative number in the revision column because you're taking money from this category, and you'll show the positive number in the equipment because you're adding to this category. If there's a change in personnel salaries, remember to include the fringe benefits associated with the salary, working closely with your accounting department to ensure you have all of the current percentages and figures. And please note that unless you're asking for an increase in federal funds from what was initially approved, the budget total should be the same for the current budget to the new budget. The 424A is an online form, and I'm showing you this briefly to show what it looks like. So you'll have your newer revised budget, and it'll also show your budget categories. However, for this example and others to follow, we will use the PDF form as it's just a little bit easier to see online. So in the newer revised budget categories, you will use columns E, F, and G to show your revised budget. You will enter in column E the federal amount of increase or decrease in funds, in column F the increase or decrease of non-federal funds, and column G will provide the total. And then in section B, you will fill out your new, column 1, you will fill out your new categories of personnel or equipment wherever your changes have been made.